Welcome to Becoming Spiritual, a podcast about the magic that surrounds us and has always been a part of us. I'm your host, Heather Dolan, a passionate seeker dedicated to bringing together beautiful humans who are doing amazing things in this world. Together, we will explore healing modalities and practical spiritual practices that can enrich your everyday life. We will also hear stories of awakenings, many from people in the corporate world who have broken out of the spiritual closet. Wherever you are in your journey, know you have found a community of open-hearted individuals committed to making themselves and our world a better place. Welcome home. In today's episode, we are talking with Priscilla Keresey. She has a site called Manifesting For Skeptics. Highly encourage everyone to go check it out. We'll definitely put everything in the show notes. But she shares so much wisdom with us today about everything from manifesting to how you can create the life you want. And it's probably not as far away as you think, with some really practical advice and tools. But also, I think what I love most about this conversation is Priscilla talks about her journey from the perspective that she has always been a skeptic, and she's always believed that she could build skills and learn how to do the things that interest her, from learning to be a hypnotist to a psychic, a medium, writing books, producing content for really everyone else to find their way to manifest the life that they want for themselves. And so we're going to talk about how she got to this place. She likes to say that there's no secret and that there's not a formula. There is a practical and really specific, what she says, non-BS guide to creating the life you want. And so she does such a wonderful job of sharing some great ways in which all of us can unpack maybe beliefs that we have or preconceived notions about what we can and can't do. And she is living proof that if you decide you put your mind to something and you want to learn a new skill, that you practice it, you do it, and that you can have success. And so I can't wait to jump in with Priscilla and to have you hear all the goodness that came out in our conversation. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to Becoming Spiritual. I'm your host, Heather Dolan, and I'm so happy, as I mentioned in our introduction, to have Priscilla Keresey here with us today from Manifesting For Skeptics. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm so delighted to be here.
Me too. We were just having a fun conversation about her work and how she's gotten out of some tricky situations lately. So I'm really excited to dive into that. But first, I think because of just what I've learned in our conversations and being on your website, kind of as soon as I met you, there's definitely this just direct, let me give you the information. I want to get you what you need. And it's a kind and loving way, but very direct. And I want to take a quote right off your website. So if you go to manifestingforskeptics.com, right on the landing page, it says, it's not a secret. It's a formula. Get the practical, specific, non-BS guide to creating the life you desire. And you go on to say, you describe yourself as an extremely practical, non-woo person. Mm-hmm. So I definitely want to dig into this because I think when we think about all the spiritual stuff, and for those who have listened to my initial intro, you know, the woo-woo thing, I do not like that word. I think we actually talked about that. Just doesn't resonate at all with me. And so I'd love to know kind of how you got to this place of practical manifesting, where you could bring all that you are, all your skills. I know you're a seeker and went on a big journey and have really distilled everything down in this really practical, accessible way for people. Oh, and one other thing I want to say, I love also on your website, when you look at the about page for you, you put it right out there. I'm an ordinary person, just like you. There's nothing special about me, yet I am extraordinary, just like you. And that's so beautiful, because also a big part of this podcast is helping people find their gifts and who they are, and not necessarily feeling like, oh my gosh, if I wasn't born with X, there's no way I'm going to get here. Or
Right.
feeling like we're on the outside of this community if you don't have these experiences since childhood of channeling or being able to manifest whatever you want by, age 15. And so I love your story and all the work you've done, which is you've taught yourself all these things. So it's something that is literally teachable skills. So how did you get to this place? So take us back to kind of your journey to Manifesting for Skeptics being born.
Wow. Okay. So I'll just give you the highlights. She's still with us. God bless her. I have a very difficult and self-centered parent who caused me, before I really had individuated myself as a human being, to really doubt myself. So let's just say there was a lot of gaslighting going on. So I came into adulthood really disconnected, really detached from myself, really, dissociated. I didn't know who I was or what I wanted, because I'd gotten a lot of feedback like, oh, you don't feel that way. Or even, in words spoken in my best interest, quote unquote, really caused a real schism. So you mentioned earlier, like feeling on the outside looking in. I really felt like there's something wrong with me, or there's nothing inside of me, or everything that's inside of me is incorrect. So I had really crushingly low self-esteem, all the behaviors that come with it, like drinking too much, promiscuity, taking crazy risks. I was hitchhiking across the country when Ted Bundy was picking up girls who looked just like me, so it was just, developing, trying to feel something, really feel it. And in such an extreme way, or such an unquestionable way that I could identify, like, I am having this feeling. I am feeling excited or high or crazy or manic or depressed even. And also at that same time, sort of pursuing dreams that weren't mine. I'd identify a woman that I thought was beautiful or talented, or everybody thought was impressive. And I like, oh, she's a photographer. She takes black and white pictures. I'll take a photography class. So I did a lot of things, started a lot of hobbies and pursuits that I don't think they necessarily came from my drive and desire. So when I really started to get a sense of what was kind of missing with me, I did a lot of work with hypnosis and really dove into all the new age stuff, and encountered some good teachers and some teachers that made me know, if I'm going to teach, I have to do better than that. Because some teachers, they'll tell you everything, but, they'll like withhold that key ingredient in the recipe to make it work, because there can be competitive or whatever. So when I began to decide that what I wanted to do was develop my own sixth sense, and so I set about deciding, first of all, I want to know my sixth sense so I could know myself. But then as I began to explore there, I realized, well, I also can use this and tune into other people. And so I began to, well, first I became a hypnotist, but then I began to apply some of the information that was coming through for me psychically. And so it all kind of came together, where for me personally, the sixth sense and all that we can use it for and operate with it, and all the ways we can apply it, had to have a grounded and practical way, because it had to be that for me. I had to have a real experience. I couldn't be satisfied with a subtle experience. Like, imagine your guides are here, and imagine a white light coming down through you. And all these things are beautiful. But for me, because I'd been so disconnected for so long, I needed like evidence. I needed something
More
tangible.
Yeah.
Right. So I taught myself to be a psychic, and I taught myself to be a medium, and became an evidential medium. And through the work, I realized that using these two parts of the mind in the right proportion, I could create anything. And that's how I came to Manifesting for Skeptics. So that was the highlights on a long journey.
So what age did you start that new age exploration, and how did that come about? Was there just a moment where you saw a billboard and you're like, oh, wait, I think I need to do that? Were there messages that you were maybe receiving, or how did you get to that point?
I was 31, and I had just separated from my husband. We'd been married just a short time, and the separation was fine. We didn't have any children, and it was just not a good idea. So we had gotten married and split up. And I had been suffering from an eating disorder for about 12 years at that point. And I decided, having tried so many nutritionists and outpatient programs to overcome what was kind of addictive behavior, I went for a past life regression, not knowing what that was going to be like. I really didn't have a sense of what is new age. This was back in the late 80s, very early 90s. So, there wasn't
Someone
no internet.
recommended that, or
Somebody must have recommended it to me. And, having tried everything else and having no other notions, I thought, well, okay, why not? And I had a session with a hypnotist who regressed me to an earlier life, and I was cured like that. And that's when I said, I have to learn how to become a hypnotist, and I have to learn how to do regression. And it was through that study of the way that the mind works, the two parts, the conscious and the subconscious mind, relate to one another, that also led me to dive into not only some of the other things that were at issue with me, self-esteem and related things, but also a real tangible understanding of my sixth sense and how it communicated to my conscious mind. And then the psychic stuff just started from there. And I really feel that psychic work, mediumship, is a skill. It's not a gift. Like learning a language or learning an instrument, the more you practice, the better you get at it. And you just get more fluent with it. And, your ear is more attuned, or your mind's eye is more attuned. And the ability to translate those senses, those non-specific senses, into something concrete is practice.
Yeah. And that's what I love about this, because I think, again, people think that most of the things that you're talking about, being able to even themselves be hypnotized, feels out of reach sometimes, of how, well, that worked for her, but I don't know that it could work for me. I could never do that. So I think just you sharing your story, thank you for that, because I do feel like that's how people are going to be able to hopefully see a possibility, which is a big part of what I want to do with this community and with the podcast, is to let people know that there is a way that you can develop these things. And we can talk about how you've created your different formulas for helping people to get to whatever it is that they might be trying to manifest in their life. Because we know manifesting is everywhere. Everywhere we look, do this course, do this practice, YouTube's podcasts, there's, all the things. It's definitely a big buzzword right now.
The thing is, we're creating all the time. And if we know how we're doing it and that we're doing it, then we can do it more intentionally.
Yeah. You're giving the formula. So how long do you practice? Because I know usually along these journeys, as we're trying to learn something for ourselves, that's when a lot of times we discover that, wow, this is something I can bring to others and help them. I assume throughout your healing journey, it sounds like you explored lots of different modalities. So how long were you in that study phase before you started? Obviously that's amazing that you healed from a session. I mean, that's pretty unbelievable. Like during that time, as you're healing and learning more modalities, like how long was that before you became the teacher?
Well, I think it was probably too long, because I liked being a student.
Yeah.
I was a bit like a kid in a candy store. I had grown up a Catholic, and though I wasn't a real active Catholic, that was my framework. And I'd taken, a couple of yoga classes, but didn't understand that there's stuff behind yoga besides stretching and breathing, right? So I just consumed past life work, aura work, Reiki, energy healing, spirit guide study, automatic writing, remote viewing, like all of that stuff. I just dove into it. And then I just had one of those moments, I think we all do at some point, when we're deciding whether to buy something or not, or between which two products do I want to buy, where we just kind of get up off the couch and go, okay, time to make a decision. So it was probably maybe 6 or 7 or 8 years before I made the decision to narrow my study down to hypnosis. And I became a hypnotist almost right away. And I used that in a lot of the other things that I was playing with and dabbling in. And I began to, in a part-time way, because I still was working full-time, to help clients with hypnosis. But probably 6 or 7 years before I thought, I'm going to really examine and work on what it means to be psychic. But I think this is the power of our minds. We just have to make decisions. And I think it is rare, but it doesn't have to be rare that a person can be healed in one session. I think it worked for me because I was naive. I was clueless. I
You have
went
no
into that
expectations.
thinking, what can go wrong? Of course,
Yeah.
this will work. So, I think that's why sometimes it's referenced in the Bible, like, be like a little child, like be a believer. And, sadly, by the time most of us get to adulthood, we've had enough experiences to make us cynical or jaded even a little bit. And so people will think, well, hypnosis wouldn't work for me. It won't unless you choose to believe I'm going to engage in this and kind of see what happens. So it can be very playful also. And all of that imagination, all that playfulness, all that fantasy visualization, that's all in the subconscious mind. And it is this huge, bottomless, pulsing force of information. And the degree to which we pay attention to it and extract useful stuff from it is the degree to which we can use our thinking minds to allow it to come in and inform us.
I love that. Because also another pillar of the podcast is as people are thinking about life and might start exploring like you did. I was the same way, like ravenous for information. I can't say I checked all the boxes with all the things you did and certified in all these things. My mind was kind of exploding there a little bit, thinking of all the modalities you like checked off the box in a really short time period. But as you said, you were working full time before you transition. So a big part of this is how some people, that's their path. They feel really called and do transition into doing full time, whether it's healing work or the work that you're doing, which we'll talk about. But what was that like for you as you were working in some type of role and having all these experiences, I don't know, at night, weekends?
Yeah.
How did you kind of bridge those or bring those together where you were able to create a cohesive existence?
Again, for me, it was a decision. I decided with, again, a mix of just determination and belief in myself. Maybe not belief in myself necessarily making all the right decisions in the right order, but belief that if I really wanted it and I followed my instincts about it, that it could come to pass. I was a graphic designer and then morphed into the web design business for my whole career.
Okay.
And one of my last clients was a university in New York City. And so I was going there full time and doing a project for them. So I was employed by them, but not kind of a salaried employee. So I was already used to a kind of feast or famine sort of financial lifestyle. So it wasn't scary for me to consider giving up the salary and the benefits, because there were times when I'd be a month or two between freelance gigs that I didn't have work. So I was pretty sensible about money and kind of set some money aside leading up to the date that I decided to stop working for the university. And I first had, this is a funny story, because I first had opened a little tiny office in my town, and I was only like billing myself as a hypnotist because it's a pretty conservative town that I live in. And I knew if I start hanging out a shingle as a psychic, I might not even get anybody coming in for hypnosis. So I did that. And I remember telling my partner at the time, I only want to get enough clients to pay the rent. So at least I wouldn't be like going down. So about 3 months later, I was sitting with my partner at the kitchen table going, I only have enough clients to pay the rent. And I just heard myself say it out loud. And I went, well, of course, duh. So I redefined that to myself and manifested, more clients. And I just started saying to myself, I sign up 2 new clients every day in a very casual sort of throwaway kind of manner. And it became so. So for me, I reached a point already, I think, where I knew the power of my mind and using my mind in the right intentional way to manifest what I wanted for myself. And I haven't looked back since then.
That's amazing. So were you sharing at the time that you were doing this work in the professional space, or were you like kind of church and state separation, just doing your day job?
Yeah.
Oh, you went,
But, some of the people that I worked with in the IT department and some of the most analytical, black and white, literal minded people, I'm like, come on, let me try hypnosis on you. Come on, let me try it. And, I had good relationships with them. And so they were some of my first practice people. So people knew what I was doing. Sure.
That's awesome. And did you have anyone who was like, this is amazing, I have to explore this, and you kind of set them up to go on a journey, or?
Not that I know of. I did have a couple of people who wanted to, but didn't find that they could relax them. I went to work with one guy. He wanted to quit smoking. So we were starting the hypnosis process, and his name was Don. And I was like, Don, just relax, close your eyes. He's like, I can't. My wife's afraid you're going to put the whammy on me. And I was like, oh, okay. So we have to talk about that first, because even though I'd done this big explanation about what hypnosis was, it hadn't sunk in because his wife was concerned that I would change his personality or,
sprinkle some weird magic on
fairy dust on him. Yes. So that was kind of that was funny. Yeah.
So then you leave the corporate IT job and then start your practice and start this work. And then how has that evolved over the years to where you are now with your course and other offerings?
Well, I continued to bill myself as a hypnotist. I live in a pretty small town, a pretty rural town. So people are spread out. We don't really have a town center, but there are a couple of places. We have one or two restaurants, and we have a library, and like a VFW. So what I did was I offered free talks on hypnosis. And that's where I got a lot of clients. So I didn't put up flyers or advertise per se, but I made myself known at some of the gathering places, and I went to our little local restaurant, a little tiny place, and they were closed on Sundays. And I did a deal with them, like, let's open for Sunday brunch for a certain number of people. I'll give a talk about hypnosis and you can serve them cocktails or brunch or whatever. So they got to make a little extra money, and they marketed me, because they had their emailing list, and I could bring some people into them who might not have been there before. So I found people to kind of co-sponsor with, where I could bring people to them and they could bring people to me. And then I ended up giving up my office and just working out of my home after a couple of years. I'd had a dog at the time that was a little aggressive, and I just didn't want a rescue dog. So when he passed, I started working out of my home. I made an office in my home, and that just started with the hypnosis. But the word had gotten out that I was also a psychic, and really the business turned over very fast, where I was doing psychic readings. I determined pretty early on that I was only going to work Monday through Friday. I wasn't going to work weekends. And to this day, I still do that. I still do the occasional one-on-one psychic reading, though I've over the years, I've written a couple of books. I've written 4 books. I've written a whole series of live and learn guides, with just quick ebook sides and self-hypnosis audio files. So always wanted to produce some products along with the service that I was doing. But when I got to maybe like 7 or 8 years ago, I had really 3 bodies of clients. I had my hypnosis clients, even though I wasn't advertising that anymore. I had my psychic and mediumship clients, and I was doing a lot of spiritual coaching as well. So I had these 3 different audiences, and they didn't really mix. They were very, very separate. But I realized as I was working with them that every one of them, at the core of their desire to come see me, whether it was to hear from a loved one or find out what's next in my life, or how can I draw closer to the Holy Spirit, or how can I, have a more self-confidence in school, low self-esteem or challenged self-esteem was a common thread through all of them. So I began to shift at that point into really focusing back to my original interest, which was how the mind communicate with each other, and the higher power, or the higher mind, or the subconscious mind, or the creator, whatever you want to call it, and how this relationship, this internal relationship, is really critical to joy and purpose and self-expression. And that's how I changed from kind of the one-on-one readings as my sole source of serving to more teaching and creating courses.
And so I see the self-esteem solution behind you there. So
Yes.
Was that your first
That
book?
was my first book, yes.
Okay.
And it addresses those 3 audiences, because the people who came for hypnosis, like me, they're very practical people. So I call that group the thinkers. They want to go after exercising a healthier self-esteem with really practical things. Tell me what to do in the right order to do it, and I will do that. And the people who come for the psychic and the mediumship, they're a little more loosey-goosey. They're more comfortable with the subtle, like, tell me what to imagine, and if I can feel something like this. So there's a whole different way to address self-esteem issues for that group of people. And the people who were more longing for a relationship with their creator, again, a whole different formula for recovering your inherent self-esteem. If that's the way that you approach power or the source. So yeah, that was my first book, The Self-Esteem Solution. And the second one, Rise and Shine, which is right next to it, is weekly exercises based on various self-esteem issues. Like if you're passive aggressive, or you look at the world through rose-colored glasses, or you make unilateral contracts. Like all these things, are so many things that we do unconsciously because of low self-esteem that makes communication, self-expression very difficult. So I have 52 chapters there. You don't have to read them in any order, but if you're struggling with passive aggression, like I'm mad, but I don't know how to say it, so I'm just going to give my boyfriend the cold shoulder. There's 5 different exercises there's like a Monday through Friday process to go through, like meditate on this on Monday, practice this on Tuesday, make this list on Wednesday. So a person can stay on one week as long as they like, or go back and forth. So that's more of a day-by-day guidebook to recovering inherent self-esteem.
It's literally a guide, which is what most people are looking for. And you usually get the high level overview and then you figure out how to apply it to your life. But this is literally a guide of, oh my gosh, that sounds so valuable.
That's what I needed.
Right.
I needed somebody to take me by the hand and say, do this in this order. You'll see benchmarks of success in this way, here, here, and here. Then you'll do that. And that's how I put Manifesting for Skeptics together too. Because I'm, like myself, I want to believe, but I still have a doubt. And it's not self-esteem related, but I didn't grow up connected to myself. And because this is so subjective, there's no one else to check in with. Like, am I connected to myself, Heather? You don't know because you're having your own experience. So It's something we have to measure, engage internally without any standard by which to measure that. So that's why I need to have a formula. And I need to know that I'm going to see results at point A, at point B, at point C. If I don't, I have to go back to point B, try that again. Okay, now I see them at point C and go forward. Which I like a really formulaic approach.
Yeah. I love that because it's really empowering because as you said, working with so many different people over the years, you always felt like they were holding back their secret sauce. Like what is that one thing that's going to help? And it's like, well, you have to keep coming here to do that. Right. And we all know that's not very empowering. It feels like you're giving everyone else the agency to help you or fix you or support you. And so all the things you're talking about, the tools you've put together are to allow people to have the agency and decide, if I want to work on this, here's how you can do that. Here's what worked for me. Here's step by step. And that's so beautiful. So thank you for doing that.
Well, the world is going to be a better place if people are happier. And, there are people who can't learn from me. They can't hear my style, which is fine. When I was learning to fly, when I was getting my pilot's license back in the day, when I would do anything to get a sense of, how cool am I, I had an instructor who said, you should take lessons from as many different flight instructors as possible, because even though I've said things to you over and over again, if somebody says it on a different day or in a different fashion, it might really click for you in a way. So, I've never been the kind of person who competes with other mediums or psychics or hypnotists or authors or manifestors or teachers. If you can learn from me, great. I'm going to give you everything I have, because the world is only going to get better if there are more self-confident people, not arrogant, not, bragging, not boastful people, but people who truly know their own worth and power. Because the more people with a healthy self-esteem, the more people who recognize I'm creating my life, the less abuse, theft, misery in relationships,
narcissism,
wasted time, narcissism. Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's like you dug down to the root cause, which is what most people are trying to uncover, but it takes work and it takes some time to get there. And it does take multiple steps. But I think a lot of times it's like an onion that you're peeling back the layer and then you figure out there's another one. And then you realize there's like 30 other layers back there. What am I going to do? How am I going to keep peeling this back so I can figure out, what was that thing that either happened to me or that I discovered about myself. And maybe it's a past life, which we haven't delved into that yet in terms of the podcast, but we'll get there, starting slowly. But I mean, what a beautiful gift if you can dig down and really find this root cause of like, yeah, why do I feel this way about myself? Is it something from childhood? Is it something that maybe I came here with that I can work on and improve? And of course, we know once you do that for yourself and you work on yourself, you heal everyone around you, because it's just going to produce a different experience being around you, being in your energy, living with you, working with you, whatever it might be.
Right. And I think if I could say one thing to your listeners, it would be, there's nothing wrong with you. Nothing is missing. Nothing's broken. Nothing's flawed. Who you are fundamentally is whole and perfect and complete. Yeah, sure, you've made bad decisions. Sure, you've made mistakes, but who you are is flawless. So get back there if you can. Do whatever it takes to recognize. And it's a very, very difficult thing because, we're called selfish when we do that, or we're accused of navel gazing if we're contemplating, too deeply our own self, we're wasting time or we're daydreaming. But we're here to express life, and there must be diversity in that. We're this gorgeous source of all creation, individually expressing itself through people. So why wouldn't the creator want to see all the fabulous aspects of creation? Of course, the way that I sing a song is going to be completely different than you sing it. And technically you may be better than I am, but the words that I bring to it, the heart that I bring to it is my own, and it's my spirit yearning to express itself. And so many people waste so much time. They want to be an artist, but they cave to the cultural information that nobody can make a living as an artist. Or they cave to parents who say, Mom and Dad think you really ought to, go into engineering. Or, we paid for this education. You really ought to get something where you can make a living. And so we listen to all these other voices except our own, in various degrees along that spectrum. I mean, I didn't know that I even had a voice growing up because it was always challenged. But even again, parents or families who with the best intentions encourage their children one way or another. If it causes you to listen to somebody else's direction or suppress your own self-expression so somebody else doesn't have to deal with their insecurities, walk on eggshells around somebody, then we're doing a disservice to our creator, because we're life and we're life aware of itself. And so we should be different from each other, and we should be who we are in all of our glory, without apology, without rationalizing, without excusing, without defending, just being who we are.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
And whatever you resonate with, and I know you mentioned this, creator, the divine source, God, whatever resonates for you, but who created us all, and we're here having this experience. And I think it's so important to remember that. And I think it's something that most people don't ever tell us or hear. So I'm so glad you're sharing that message today, and hopefully others then can share it too, because it's literally the whole reason we're here. So tell me, as we kind of dig in to the work that you're doing now with the Manifesting for Skeptics. So what does that look like for someone who has decided, okay, I want to make changes in my life. I'm not happy. I don't have joy every day. I'm stressed. I'm on the hamster wheel. I'm just going. What would you say is a step someone can take to say, okay, yeah, I'm ready? Like, I think as you refer to it on your website, you're ready to get your shit together. If I literally that's the word on there. Again, bold, hits you right in the face. Like, if you want to know what Priscilla's all about, she's going to get you what you need. So what does that mean if we're going to get our shit together?
So my feeling is this: we have to know who we are and what we want. And I would suggest, first of all, that everybody probably struggles with self-esteem a little bit, even if they don't think they do. So
100%.
I would look at that, question ourselves deeply about that. But most important, I would say, spend a lot of time daydreaming with a certain intention. So I remember before I wrote this course, Manifesting for Skeptics, I felt like something was trying to come out. I mean, a lot of people say like I want to do something, but I don't know what it is, right? I feel like I have this purpose, but I don't know what it is. I don't feel passionate about anything. I don't feel, and very often our thinking minds, our conscious mind squash that down. Like, I don't have time for that. I got to pay the bills, or unless it speaks to me loudly, I don't have time for this. But that's the time to carve out some interior space, and boredom can really help. So, don't turn on the TV after dinner, see what happens in here, or
phone down,
or take a walk, see where your mind goes, or intentionally sit down and say, I'm just going to daydream. Unlike meditation, where our goal is to clear our mind of thoughts, I would recommend that people let the mind wander. And often when we daydream, we're the heroes in our own story, right? Like I rushed into that burning building, or I rescued that dog, or whatever. We're heroes because that's who we are really inside. We're just perfect life. And if we can allow ourselves some space without criticizing ourselves for the wackiest daydreams to come up, they begin to gel into a sort of a shape or a message. Like, I think I want to write something. Like for me, it was like, I know I want to write something, but I just don't want to write another book. I want to be more interactive about it. And that's when I decided, I hadn't really thought about a course. Like I want to do a course, and what's that going to look like? And I just kept going to bed at night going, okay, you tell me. I'm here with my pen and paper and my conscious mind, and I'm going to make notes of what comes up to me. And when you give yourself permission, shit just bubbles up. I mean, you'll be driving and be like, oh, I got to write this down. Or,
you gotta have a notebook everywhere.
Right.
Or
You just follow, or in your phone, right? The dictation.
I have so many of those. I got to go through them. I'm sure there's like so much gold in there. And I have these recordings and I'm like, I got like 100 and I got to go back.
And most people set goals with their rational minds. Like, I'm going to become president of the company, by the time I'm 35, let's say. So that means by the time that I'm 30, I have to have this kind of a job. So that means by the time I'm 25, I have to have this kind of a graduate degree. So by the time I'm 20, I have to have that kind of degree, which means I have to start getting these grades now. So we set a very defined goal logically, and then we reverse engineer the steps to get there. And which is great, except sometimes we get there and we're like, why am I not happy? Or why doesn't this feel like a success? It's because we haven't been guided by what's going on in the deeper part of the mind. So I invite people to flip the script a little bit and say, okay, let me stop thinking about what I want and see what my imagination and my feeling wants to show me. And then we take that powerful, strategic thinking mind and build a structure behind or underneath inspiration, rather than trying to cram inspiration into something else. So first, give yourself permission to daydream. Or if you don't want to do that, you can give yourself the idea, focus on what you would really desire. What would you really like to have? Most people say money, right? They want to have money, but it goes deeper than that, because what they want to have is freedom, or they want to have safety, right? Or they want to be generous and share with their friends. And so daydream about that, focus on the emotions that go along with that, because our emotions are deeply tied, and they reside in the subconscious mind, and they're deeply tied to our inspiration. And they're one of the channels through which we interpret our sixth sense as we pay attention to the actions we're inspired to take. And it might be something like, why am I suddenly thinking about my college roommate after all these years? Well, give her a call, or look her up on social media, because if that randomly pops in, that there's something in there that is going to take you to the next step or help you define further what that desire is.
So trust
once
too.
Once we know what we want, what our hearts want, not what we think we're supposed to want, but what our hearts want and what gives us the most joy, then we gather the courage and the confidence to express that. So I knew that I wanted to be a psychic. I knew I did, because I felt excited about what I was learning about myself. I didn't know how to do it. This is pre-internet age, right? Now you can Google it and find anywhere. I'd have to go to some crazy little new age shop in the East Village, or order cassettes online from the back of a newspaper, right?
Yeah.
But, when you begin to pursue something and follow it, you're almost like you're pulled forward into a future version of yourself, rather than trying to force yourself forward.
Right. Which is what everyone always says, follow the joy. What makes you start? Yeah. It's so simple. The formula can be what makes you happy. And so often, if you ask someone that, they actually can't answer you, because they haven't allowed themselves to really think about it. Because chances are there's probably a lot of emotion tied to that, that they haven't allowed themselves to feel happy or find joy because it feels inconvenient or it doesn't fit in with what they're supposed to be doing in their life or what they've been told they need to do with their life.
And they can't even imagine themselves having that life because their self-esteem is low, or because they're so in debt because they made choices that weren't inspired, but were, reactive, or they're just, had some bad luck, or they didn't know then what they knew now. And so we feel trapped by these anchors from the past, like debt, that, we can think, well, that's a pipe dream. And following the bliss has been ridiculed by people. It's called nonsense. I remember I gave a talk, so I don't even remember where it was, but somebody wrote an article about me and how I was blathering all this nonsense. And I was like, wow, you've got some deep work to do, because if you're so threatened by joy that you're going to call it nonsense, it's not rational, but that doesn't mean it's nonsensical, and I think there's shame associated with it. And I get that, which is why I always wanted to have a practical application. That's the whole reason that I set off on this particular footing. I still find myself, if somebody's saying something to me about, somebody was talking to me about the Akashic records, or she channeled the Virgin Mary or something like that, and a little part of me inside went, yeah, right. Right? Because that's so part of who we are, how we're taught how to be, to ridicule what we can't see or what automatically doesn't fall under our scope of belief. So, having a way to follow your bliss. And I often tell people, play this stuff close to the vest until you start to see some results, because, you don't want people are going to feel threatened by it. They'll derail it. They'll challenge it. They'll question it. And if what makes you happy can't be your full-time job right now, find a way to do it on the weekends, or take that art class, or start writing that fantasy novel. Just find an outlet for it, because it will shift. And it doesn't have to be a slow turnover. When you learn the power of your mind, you can simply make a decision. I am now this. And, again, the degree to which you accept that power impacts how quickly that happens, or how assuredly that comes to pass.
So what do you see in modern day, what's out there in the world around manifesting, that bothers you, where you think people might be led astray, like where it might be more surface level, or, if you say enough affirmations, you'll get there. So much of this, what we've talked about, comes back to the deep work, and even so much to self-esteem and how you feel about yourself. And really it comes down to your belief system.
Yeah.
Because if you don't believe in yourself, how can you believe in anything else around you coming to you, and believing that you deserve to have a beautiful life, and that you are born here with that intention? But so I'm just curious.
Well, I think a couple things are worth being aware of anyway, is that you don't have to be a good person to manifest. There are people who are not good people, and they know how to use their minds. They know the power of the mind, and they might choose to take what is a spiritual, joyful love of abundance to mean purely money. And because they know the way the mind works, they can bring in money and not care if they're taking it away from somebody else or climbing over people to get it. So I think that's important to know. The mind works like rain falls on good people and bad people. Seeds are spread on both asphalt and fertile ground, but the capability is still there. And that's what our free will is all about. So I think that's a scary thing for people. They might say, they might have the notion that, money is like filthy lucre, because look at the people who have money, how unkind they are, how disconnected they are with empathy. I think people also misconstrue that manifesting means they can change somebody else. Like, I can make my sweetheart stop cheating, or I can make my dad stop drinking, or I can make everybody else, as racist as I am, for example. So I think the instructions are clear, they're simple, but they're not always easy because of what we have to contend with in our own minds. But, you don't have to be a saint to create a really beautiful life. And I think people, again, with self-esteem, they might have feelings like, I don't deserve this, or they might have feelings like, I don't want to be like those people.
Right.
And so we don't dive in wholeheartedly. And, it can be scary, frankly, to think of all the power that we have.
Yeah. Well, I know, I mean, we definitely all know someone or probably lots of people who we can look at them and say, gosh, how did they get so lucky? Like they're not
Yeah.
even a good person and they've
Right.
got all this money and they seem like they have all these great things, which of course we know with social media and all the awareness that so much of that on the outside, when you dig into who they are and do they even have any ounce of joy, we really don't know.
Right.
Only they know. So it's really surface, but it can feel like, why did that person get that promotion? They're horrible. They're not a great leader. They're, abusive to people, yet
Right.
they do. They get the promotion, they get the money, they get whatever that is. And I think also it's redefining what success is, what
Mhm.
abundance is, as you said. And, I think we're so caught up in, if you're manifesting, it's to make more money. And when you do peel back those layers to, no, it's really, you just want safety. You want to feel seen in your work that you're doing. You just want
Right.
to be appreciated. You just, whatever it might be.
And just want the room to be who you are without anybody their nose in your business, and you're right. If somebody is manifesting a lot of power in a position or power with money, because it might come from a deep insecurity and
Mhm.
not from a desire to be generous,
Right.
they still can apply the tools in a way, but that's maybe why they keep going after more and more and more, because they
Right.
achieve a goal, but it feels empty. Let me go
They're
for
never
more, like
satisfied.
chasing that first high, like you never are going to get it because the desire is coming from the mind and not from the heart or the spirit. And another thing we see often is people who manifest successfully, good, bad, or indifferent. These are the kind of people who can make a lot of money in a business, lose it all in bankruptcy, do it again, make another $1 million, lose it again, make another $1 million, lose it again, because they know what to do and they know the power of their mind to create. And so they
But they're
might
probably not in
stumble.
alignment with who they are in
Right.
abundance and what all those other things that need to be in alignment, which is why they
Yeah.
keep losing it.
Yeah. But because they know the formula, they can
Yeah.
keep getting it back
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. It's so fascinating. So I know you also describe yourself as a practical psychic. So I think if we could maybe go back to that for a minute,
Sure.
because depending on when this episode comes out, just had an episode talking about mediumship and growing it as a skill as well and connecting to these things. And I appreciate how you don't see it as gifts and see it much more practical as this is a skill, something I could build. So what was that like for you? Was there this moment where you felt like you could create anything? And maybe that goes back to manifestation as well, but being able to tap into or build this skill, because maybe some people might say, well, you were able to build that skill, but maybe I can't. Maybe I can't learn to do hypnosis. And I love how you talked about that it was pre-internet age. So you weren't following these courses. So you obviously were very determined to
Yeah.
teach yourself, driven to teach yourself these
Right.
skills, and went way more out of your way than the average person now who would just Google it and sit on their phone and be like, okay, bring it to me easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might have had to have waited for the tapes to arrive in the mail or go to a library and go look
Yeah.
something up and
Exactly right.
go
Yeah.
through like 100 books before you found what you were looking for. I just want to hear a little bit more about that.
Sure. One of the things that really helped me know that I could go forward with this as a skill set was I really believed that everybody has a sixth sense. Animals have a sixth sense. And as I learned through my hypnosis studies, the way that the mind works, I know that the conscious mind, takes in information from our five senses. Ideally we have all five of them, but takes information in from our five senses, you know, tosses it around the conscious mind and then projects it back out into the world around us. So we tend to, through confirmation bias and the natural ways that we seek out what we believe already, there's this shallow interaction and sort of shallow depth to the workings of the conscious mind. But the subconscious mind, where the sixth sense is, I truly believe that everybody has this. We all have a gut instinct. We all have had hunches. We might not have put it together till after the fact.
Mhm.
Like, oh, I knew I shouldn't have done that. Or I
Can
knew
you
I should have
define
done
what you
that.
see sixth sense as?
So the sixth sense, as I see it, is awareness of all of the non-rational information that's going on around us. So think about it this way. I can look out my window and there's a forest all around me. So if you think of that as the sixth sense, but if I'm going to go look for something or notice something with my vision, with one of my five senses, I cannot take it all in. it's all there, but I can only look at one leaf at a time or one tree at a time. I can get kind of a big vision, but then it all begins to blur around the peripheral, right? It's all there. It all exists. It's all neutral. It's just information. It's nothing more. Now, if I'm going about my day and I still have this like panoramic view of the forest in front of me, and I notice something like this tree over here is on fire, or there's smoke, I notice it out of the corner of my eye. This feels like to me what happens with the sixth sense. We're aware of everything that goes on around us. And if something really jumps out at us, we might get that feeling or get that hit or go, oh, I don't think I'm going to go that way, or I'm going to make that phone call right now. So that's kind of the spontaneous way that our sixth sense can, like just the neutral information in the world communicates with us. But I also feel that, and I felt that I could go looking for it. So if I want to go look for, a red maple leaf in this forest, I know what I'm looking for, and I'm going to know it when I see it. And that's how I approached the sixth sense. Like, I'm going to go into this field of subtle information, non-logical information that exists outside of what I can see, hear, taste, touch, and smell, and see what comes to me. Now, part of that was learning, am I clairaudient? Do I hear things? Am I clairvoyant? Do I see things? Am I clairsentient? Do I feel things? Clairgustient, taste things, or clairsent, smelling things? So I learned early on that I am not clairaudient at all. In some of the books I read back in the day, listen to what your guide says, listen to what that inner voice is. I can't hear shit. I am not, that's just, I can in real life, but that's not my, like, I would rather watch the news than listen to it. I would rather read a book than listen to it. It's just easier. It's an easier channel for me, a more comfortable channel to take in that information. We all have that. We're either visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. And people can look online. There's something called the VAK checklist, or the visual, auditory, kinesthetic checklist. You can find them online. And they're often used to help students find the best way to learn. Like, do I follow instructions better if someone speaks them to me, shows me how with their hands, or I look at them on a guide? We're visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, right? So I learned after a long time thinking I'm failing at this because I can't hear anything, that, but I can see things, or the impressions come to me visually. So I can close my eyes. If I look for something on the blank screen of my inner eyelids, I'm aware of a visual that will come up there. I'm not going to hear a sound. I'm not going to hear a guide telling me, or a spirit person telling me, or someone else's sixth sense in a psychic reading saying, this is your favorite song. Here's a Frank Sinatra song. I might see the face of Frank Sinatra and get the feeling, the clairsentient feeling of one of the songs that I know of his, for example. So I kind of took the scientific approach first about the sixth sense, and I broke it down into the ways that made logical sense for me, because I had to approach it practically and in a tangible way, because I'm a skeptic. I've been 30 years in the New Age field, and I'm still a skeptic. It takes a lot. I don't think I've ever had a good reading. That's how skeptical I am.
Oh, wow.
I don't think I've ever had a reading that's made me go, wow. And
is this a reading for yourself, you mean? Or
no,
like
from
when
anybody
you're working
else, from another medium? There've been moments where, that's pretty good. Yeah. And I'm open to it, but it's helped me to create a standard for myself that says, my clients need to walk away going, that had to be my dead dad. It had to be. Only he knew that I liked that song, and only he knew that I called him Jefe, and only he knew, like things like this, rather than this lovely feeling of a dad in spirit who just loves you and he's so proud of you. Yeah.
You're like, everyone has some kind of dad,
right? Or a father figure like that, hopefully, right? So I really needed to approach the psychic stuff, the sixth sense stuff, in a very practical way, a way that would make logical sense to me. And so I explored, and I started the exploration because I was studying hypnosis, about what is the subconscious mind and what's in there, and how do we access what's in there. And that led to a very structured foundation about the sixth sense for me, and what it's like, and how I can extract information from there, and why sometimes, something goes right by and it's like, oh, I just had a feeling about something. Sometimes they're alarming, like turn left. And other times it's more subtle, like, don't get in that elevator with that guy, and again, how you pay attention to it is how practical it is of use for you in your life.
Yeah. And I think that's where people can get really confused, where they think, well, is it just my fear talking or my ego talking? Or how do I know that that's me with elevators? It's because of a trauma or something. Yeah, I died in an elevator in another life or something, or I had some scary experience when I was a child.
It can be very, very hard to read yourself because in the sixth sense is in the same non-logical place where the emotions are and the fears are and the memories are and the fantasies are and the worries are and the anxieties are. It's all in that non-specific area. So it can be hard to tease them apart. There are a couple of ways. If you're having a psychic impression or an intuitive impression, first of all, if it's neutral. So you might have a feeling like, I'm not going to get in the elevator with that guy, rather than, oh my God, I'm not going to get in the, and if you're having that really emotional sense or fear first, it's probably fear. It's probably emotion and probably fear. I mean, I'd pay attention to it anyway.
Right.
But if it's just a calm sense of, this elevator's going to fall, I'm not, then you're like, I'm just not going to get on it. There's rarely alarm, and people who have written about or told stories about how last minute decisions saved their lives, they never talk about being like freaked out, but just this knowing, not today or not now or not there. So you might have an emotional reaction to it afterwards.
Right.
Like, you see your husband and, you go, he's cheating. You just know it. It just drops into your mind, or she's pregnant, just drops into your mind out of the blue. So if it's neutral, comes in out of the blue, apropos of nothing else you were thinking about. And third, if you can't dismiss it. So if you say, oh, I'm thinking she's pregnant because I was just thinking about that, but it keeps coming back and it keeps coming back and it keeps coming back, despite your efforts to dismiss it. A linear thought we can dismiss. We can explain why I'm thinking that to myself and put it aside and we'll forget about it. But if it keeps popping up again, those three things, if you tick all those boxes, what you're experiencing is from your sixth sense.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. So helpful. So as we look to wrap up, I feel like you've already given us so much practical steps and tools and information for those who want to just even start doing their own exploration, and whether that's writing or just, like you said, taking a little quiet time, maybe a challenge to not, like you said, turn on the TV or put your phone down and give yourself 15 minutes to just dream or imagine and see what comes up. Anything else that you want to share that you think?
Yes, I would remind everyone that we are always creating with our attention. So what we focus on, we get more of. So if you don't remember anything else I've said in this time, remember that you're going to get what you repeatedly focus on. You're going to get what you repeat to yourself. So let it be positive. That's really the only mental effort that's required in manifesting or changing anything about your life or self-hypnosis. Let your attention be on what you desire, as though it is happening now. There's no time in the sixth sense. So if we say, I want to lose weight, or I'm going to start my diet next Monday, we're either in a constant state of wanting to lose weight. In other words, we're overweight if we keep perpetuating that, or I'll start my diet on Monday. It's never Monday in the subconscious mind. It's always right now. So let your suggestions or your focus be on the positive as though it's happening now. And this is not just Pollyanna. This isn't just, the power of positive thinking, but, purposely taking your attention to a state of mind where you are experiencing and enjoying what you desire, because you are going to get what you focus on. You're going to get what gets your attention. You are. And many people look at the environments that they're in, or the rooms they're in, or the workplace they're in, or the relationship dynamics they're in, and go, this just sucks. Yeah. It's just toxic. It's unpleasant. I'm unhappy. But that's what they continue to focus on and notice.
Right.
And that room, that environment has no power of its own. It was created yesterday. We're just experiencing it today. And people forget that it's not a living thing with volition and a desire to make our lives miserable. The environment's finished. It's dead. It's done. But as we notice it and focus on it, we recreate it to live another day. So even if you're overweight, or you're sick, or you're in a toxic relationship, or you hate your job, this room you're standing in was created yesterday. So start thinking about getting into the feeling of what it feels like to be loved, or what it feels like to be valued at work, or what it feels like to have the freedom or the time or the money to express yourself as a painter or playwright or actor or whatever it might be, or athlete, and keep your attention there. And if your mind wanders to negative, fueling that what's negative in your environment. The minute you notice it, turn it around and change it to something different, because you're going to get what you repeat to yourself. And so grab the reins of your life, start focusing on what's positive.
That's amazing. And so in one of those examples, you're sick or overweight or trying to, for health reasons, lose weight, say, for instance, or maybe you have to gain weight. What would be something that they would focus on? Would it be an affirmation? Would it be just the thoughts they're telling themselves?
Yes. So I think manifesting is more than the law of attraction. The law of attraction is pretty passive, where we just think attractive thoughts, right? Or at least it was the way I learned it. Mm-hmm. Manifesting is really creating a mold in which the energy of our life is going to pour. And that can be a determined insistence on, this is who I am now. So I would invite your listeners to sit quietly for a minute or two. Don't have to clear your mind. You don't have to relax. You don't have to have both feet on the floor. Skip all that crap. Get into a state of mind where you feel good. And it doesn't matter if that comes from a memory 50 years ago that lasted 5 seconds. Call up a feeling that is a good feeling in your imagination. Stick with it until you start to feel like you want to smile from the inside out. So sometimes this will take 5 seconds. Sometimes it might take 5 minutes to dredge that up if you're having a rough time. Mm-hmm. So let's say you want to be in better health, and part of that is losing weight. But it's hard because every time you put your pants on, they're tight, right? So of course you're revisiting this environment over and over and over again. So that's going to keep happening until you change this. So when you notice, a little tight, just go, this is getting lighter. Even though it's not true, tell yourself, there's more room here. Because we have to change our focus. And once we've gotten an idea firmly rooted in the subconscious mind as truth, the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what's untrue and what is true, then the conscious mind is going to gather information, that confirmation bias, to support what we believe. So I would invite your listeners to sit quietly for a moment. Just even if they never felt like they were in good shape, get into a state of mind where they felt happy. Maybe they're graduating. Maybe they had their first kiss. Maybe they just had a baby, whatever it is, whatever brings them joy. Let that feeling wash up in them until you can feel yourself smiling from within. And then attach a picture if you're visual, a sound if you're auditory. Maybe people are congratulating you. You look how healthy you are. You look fabulous. Your sweetheart saying, God, you look like the girl I married. You're standing in front of a mirror, looking down at the numbers on the scale, if that's how you measure. Moving with joy and agility and nimbleness. Get the feeling. Use as many of your senses, your mind's eye, your mind's ear, your mind's heart, your mind's feeling, your mind's emotions, and hold that picture for as long as you can. It's not going to take more than 5 minutes, and do that every day. And once a day is fine. And when you start to notice, my pants are bigger, you don't go, they're bigger, but they need to be bigger yet. Don't cancel out your victories. Right. Celebrate the smallest. I lost half a pound. Look at me go. I'm closer to my goal weight every day. And bring that language into your life all the time, even if you're not in that visualizing state, as I was talking, that emotional state. Bring it into your life all the time. I'm closer to my goal weight every day. Just say it to yourself as you're walking around. Just every time it pops into your head, my abs are tighter. I feel great. Or I'm back to my high school weight. I can fit my skinny jeans, whatever the motivation is. And your body has nothing else giving it instructions except your subconscious mind. And it must follow those instructions when they are firmly enough rooted in there.
Oh, that's so helpful. Thank you.
And when you learn the power of your mind, you're unstoppable.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. Well, I want to thank you for taking time to share all of this with us. And I will be sharing all the links to your books and website with the course so people can check all of that out. And I know my eye keeps going to the self-esteem solution. And I feel like everyone feels like it should be like required school reading, because even thinking about my kids, just how much, even in the young age, how impressionable, how everything comes from how they feel about themselves. And so if there's ways we can just build that up in and of itself, I feel like what a different world it would be. So thank you.
But even if you didn't have a happy childhood, you can still switch this around. Absolutely.
I love that. I love that. So thank you. Thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for taking time to share. And Yeah. And I'm just excited to hear how listeners resonate with all of this and try things, and maybe they'll share back with us and I can come back and share some comments and feedback. So thank
Yeah,
you.
that would be
So
great. It's been such a joy to
yeah,
be here. As you can tell, I'm really passionate about this and I could talk for hours.
you are. And I love it. So thank you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your precious day to listen to our podcast. If this episode resonated with you, we would love for you to share it with someone you love. That would mean the world to us. Also, if you feel called, please follow our show so you will know when a new episode drops. If you want to go one step further, you can even rate this episode, as it allows our podcast to find its way to others. Lastly, we've done our best to share resources that you might find helpful in the show notes, whether that's a book recommendation or a website we referenced during the episode, a free resource, or more information on a guest who took their time to speak with us and share their knowledge. We would love for you to support their work too. You can find more information on our podcast website at becomingspiritual.me. We love you and can't wait for you to hear the next episode. Until then, know you have a place where you are welcome and you are loved. Welcome home.